Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a wonderful day. I'm really grateful because right now, before Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, I'm planning sermons, trying to find inspiration, and a number of wonderful people have agreed to join me. And I hope that this sermon is inspiring and it inspires you as it's inspired me. This year, we're really focusing on communal prayer. And if you haven't had an opportunity to look at our prayer guide that we just put out with the phonetics of the prayers, and there's a link for the actual song. So you can learn the songs. And I think that it's so important. Everything is landing differently this year. And it's so important that we pray together this year. And I know there's so many people who have not had the luxury of learning this, and they have to start as adults like they're kids almost. And I see you, and I want to be able to enable you to have that self-guided experience. And you can just take that and you can literally put it up on your screen, and you can have the accompanying song with it, and you can listen and read and be able to learn those prayers. So I'm encouraging you to do that. Today I want to tell a story that may be triggering for you. So I want to warn you in advance, and maybe if you can uh, prepare yourself and be in the space to be able to connect with it. There's a lot of stories that I tell, and the stories are from many years ago, but there's few stories like this one that are stories that happen today. This year has been a year like none other. The hostages have defined the Jewish year. October 7th, Simchat Torah last year, darkest day for Jews, for the world in our lifetime. But since then, the plight of the hostages has been one that has defined us. And it's woken us up. It's caused us to pray and to think and to challenge in a way that we haven't before. On the last day in November of the last hostage deal, there was a young woman that was released. Now, there have been over 100 hostages that have come out of Gaza, either rescued or released. Most of them are not speaking, and I wouldn't expect them to be able to be in a space to speak. Holocaust survivors, some of them, it took years until they could start speaking, and some of them never spoke. So I don't expect to hear anything from any of them. But there have been a few hostages that have spoken, and a few that have spoken quite a bit. A couple of weeks ago, I had the great privilege of spending a few hours with one of these hostages. She was released on the last day of the last hostage deal. Her name is Sappir Cohen, and I want to tell you about her, and I want to share her story. She has shared a lot of her story, and there's elements that I'm going to share with you that she hasn't shared, and she's allowed me to share. And I want to share this with you. I was planning on actually waiting to share this for my Yom Kippur sermon. And the reason why I'm sharing it with you now is because of Psalm 27. She credits Psalm 27 with saving her life. And I'll tell you the story and I'll explain to you how that happens. And right now, in the month of Elul, until Hoshana Rabbah, So for the next 50, around 50 days, we have a tradition, an annual tradition, not just this year, an annual tradition to say this psalm every single day. And so the goal of this conversation that we're going to have today is to inspire you to open the psalm, open the Tehillim, look at Psalm 27, and to say it every single day, and to have in mind the hostages. May they be, may they be let go, let them free, and to think of Sappir and those hostages who have been released, thank God, but are still suffering in so many ways. I want to take you back to the summer of 2023. Sappir Cohen is 28 years old. She's from Ramat Gan. And she tells me that she had a feeling that something bad was going to happen to her. She thought it was some sort of illness, maybe something medical. But she had this feeling that something bad was coming upon her. And she started going from doctor to doctor, but no one could find anything substantial. And finally, one doctor told her that he found some kind of virus, but it didn't warrant any fear, not to the level that she was experiencing. But she wasn't relaxed. And she decided now in Israel, there's a huge divide between religious and non-religious, Chiloni and Haredi. I wish it wasn't this way, but it is this way. And there are many secular Jews who they even are aware of Jewish traditions and culture and prayers. They don't. They don't because they don't want to, because they're not religious. And so Sapir is someone who was raised as a Chiloni, as a secular Jew. But she decided that maybe she should pray. It was the first time in her life. She looked online and she found a specific chapter from the Psalms, and she saw that it was recommended to recite this chapter for 30 days and it would bring health and blessings. And so she decided every day to recite this chapter. As the days passed, she started paying attention to the words. The words of the chapter weren't about illness. They spoke of war. They spoke about God saving her. And she said that she wondered why she was saying it and what war was she praying to be saved from. On the morning of Friday, October 6th, Shmini Atzeret, Sappir was supposed to go to the Nova Festival together with her boyfriend Sasha. Sasha really didn't want to leave home, but Sappir insisted, and she convinced him to skip their quiet weekend in their apartment in Ramat Gan and to head down to visit his parents. And his parents live in kibbutz Nir Oz, which was right near the festival. And she said to me, it was literally just a regular weekend, if I look back at it. And then came Simchat Torah, that faithful Shabbat Saturday morning. She says the alarms went off. She heard red alert, red alert. The rockets are raining down. They heard the terrorists breaking in. 10 of them just walked right in and pulled her out. She was overcome with hysterical fear, shaking, sweating in terror. As she heard Allah Akbar, the huge commotion. And at that moment, as everything was racing through her mind, she understood the meaning of her prayer. When the terrorists put her on a motorcycle and everyone was filming her, she said she lifted her head so that her parents would recognize the footage. She told me that it was that prayer that she had been saying every day, that she now knew by heart, because she'd been saying it every day. And because of this prayer, she remained optimistic. She was abducted by the armed terrorists with nothing but her nightgown on her back. They took her on a motorcycle to Gaza, and when they arrived, an angry mob greeted her, hitting her. They attacked her, and she had to defend herself with her bare hands. And she said that she prayed to God to protect her. But in the end of it, her entire body was covered in bruises. During the first week of her captivity, Sappir said that she was placed with another hostage. Her name was Sahar. And together they were held in an apartment under tight security with two guards who would constantly mock and curse them. She could hear loud explosions outside, and she had no way of knowing if they would be struck or if a terrorist would shoot or something worse, just the paralyzing fear of the unknown. And in those terrifying moments, she realized that she didn't want to spend what could be the final chapter of her life in fear. She wanted to make a difference, she says. She wanted to give hope. And one time, she and Sahar were starving. She said, I told Sahar, don't worry, we're on a mission now. We knew there was a room where they kept all the pita bread. And we grabbed some and we stuffed them under our shirts and we ran and ate them just before the terrorists came back. And since they were staying in a fragile building while the IDF bombed nearby, the terrorists decided to move them into the tunnels. She spoke about the tunnels, the deep, dark tunnels in Gaza. Everything was damp. It smelled terrible. She said this terrorist sang songs about conquering Israel and hurled curses constantly as they would walk through the tunnels, step by step, floor by floor. She told me that at one point they passed 20 people that were packed tightly together like sardines lying there. And she realized that it was a tunnel for the older hostages. And they were all lying there together, pale. And they looked as if they were dead. They couldn't even lay. They had to lay on one another because they were so packed in there. While in the tunnels, she said she found more hostages. And together they formed a group. And for her, the group became a source of strength. And on the days when someone broke down, the others would lift them up. And they took care of one another, clinging to hope, doing their best to stay alive. And at one point, she said one of the hostages was paralyzed with fear, thinking the terrorists could kill them at any moment. She said that was my moment. I managed to calm him down and bring him some optimism, even in the impossible circumstances. She described one of the most amazing days amidst all the difficult moments. One of the terrorists called her to watch a TV. On the TV, there was a rally in Tel Aviv. Thousands of people. It took her but a few seconds to realize that this was a rally for her and the other hostages. She said she became elated, realizing that the people of Israel and the people of the world were rallying for her. But then one of the terrorists remarked. He said to her, when the Jews are united, they are strong. But we'll wait patiently. Soon there will be chaos among them. They knew that the Jews' greatest weakness was division amongst ourselves. That is our greatest weakness. One day, she said the terrorist guarding her drew a candle and wrote her name on the candle, Sappir. And she asked him, why did you do that? And he said, I don't like you. You're my enemy. But when you're here, there is light. She said she couldn't even believe the terrorists had said those words to her. She told me that at all times she was guarded by four terrorists. There was one particular terrorist that would talk to her a lot. And she asked him, why are you speaking to me so much? And he said, because I see that maybe I can convert you to Islam. And she had to think on her feet and use ways to be able to figure out how to use his words against him so that she could stay alive. She was held captive there for 55 days. And during those long days, she said, that chapter, those words of the Psalms gave her the strength and the hope not to despair. One of the guards asked her, do you pray? And she said, yes, I do. And I know the prayer by heart. And he told her to recite it, and she did so. And it's amazing to me that this chapter that she recited to this terrorist is a chapter that from the beginning of the month of Elul, right now, until Shmini Atzeret, which is going to be the true anniversary of that terrible day, every single year, we have a custom to recite Psalm 27 twice a day. What is this Psalm 27 that kept Sappir alive that she speaks about? The psalm expresses a strong belief in God. It begins with the words, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is my strength of my life. Whom shall I dread? King David. These are the words of King David. He says, when evildoers approach me to devour my flesh, my oppressors and my foes, they stumbled and fell. If an army were to beleaguer me, my heart would not fear. If war were to rise against me, in this I trust. King David declares his unwavering trust in God, even in the face of immediate and tangible danger, even when surrounded by his enemies, waging war against him. Later in the psalm, he pleads, he says, do not conceal your countenance from me. Do not abandon me. Do not forsake me. God of my deliverance, do not give me over to the will of my oppressors. He says, do not give me over to the will of my oppressors. And the psalm ends with these beautiful words, hope in the Lord, be strong, and let your heart be valiant. And hope in the Lord, trust God, and he will give you strength. The man who gave her the advice to recite that specific chapter didn't just choose any random chapter. It happened to be that when she started saying this chapter, it was the month of Elul. It was this exact time last year when she started reciting it. And that's why it was this chapter. The David Hashem, we say it twice a day in the prayers. And that's why it was recommended to her. And she recited it until Hoshana Rabbah, until the last day that it said. And the next day she was kidnapped. Now, to me, it's mind-boggling. I don't even try to, I don't want to understand. I don't want to try to ask questions on that, but I want to ask questions on this. It's all good and well. The chapter worked for Sappir. It's a beautiful story. But why should I say this chapter? And that's why I want to talk about it today. Why should you and I decide that for the next 35 days until Simchat Torah, I think that's what it is, maybe a little more, that we should say this chapter. We should focus on chapter 27. First of all, there are still many more hostages in captivity. Why shouldn't we say this chapter for them? Because they can't say it. Like Sappir, they don't know it by heart. They don't have a book there. So we can say it for them. It's the least that we can do. On top of that, this chapter, I believe, applies to all of us. Because in a sense, and please don't take this the wrong way, but in a tiny little itsy bitsy sense, we're all hostages. Before descending into this world, our souls dwelled in the shadow of divine presence. Our souls were close to God. It was warm, it was comfortable. And then suddenly, our soul was taken down and sent into this physical, into this material world. Our soul was taken hostage. But it longs. It longs for those better days when it was with God and to stay connected to God in this material world. Our soul can only do that through mitzvot, through mitzvah. And the word savta, it's a connection. It's our connection with God, with our source. The problem is that life consumes us. And sometimes we feel like we're drowning in a sea of insignificant tasks, of pursuits, of running from one thing to the next, having no time. And somehow, every time we want to do a mitzvah, something else comes up. Something urgent comes up that we can't push off, that can't wait. And so an entire year passes and the holidays come again. And we feel like, where did the year go? Where did it all go? I can't believe it's another year. It's going to be another Rosh Hashanah. And that's why we say this prayer in a very little itty bitty way. We are the hostages. And we ask God, give us the strength to deal with our enemies. Who is the enemy? The enemy is the evil inclination. The evil inclination tempts a person, lays siege to them, confusing us with all kinds of quote unquote important things, things that aren't really important. And in most cases, they aren't even necessary. And so this year, everything lands differently this year. But this year, we have this time, this beautiful time right now, the month of Elul. This is the season when we refocus. It's true that over the year, we can go off path. It's okay. But we refocus. It's this time of the year that God reaches out and calls us to come back. The Rebbe actually talks about this and says that this time of the year in Elul is the time to break free. These are the words the Rebbe uses, to break free from the captivity of the material world. Break free from the captivity of the material world, to draw closer to God. And then in the words of King David, we say, hope in the Lord, be strong, and let your heart be valiant, and hope in the Lord. May us, in our own way, breaking free from our captivity, give the energy of these hostages that are in Gaza to break free from their captivity. And may us reciting the prayer Psalm 27 for them. Give them the strength. And may we all together turn to God and say, let my people go. May they go. And may they be able to come back home unscathed. And may it be today.